Good morning. You have signed up for the Managing Risk program put on by Kelsey O'Shea and Peggy Murray from Cooperative Extension. This program will focus on the perspectives, insights, and discussions on how to keep moving forward through a low milk price year. We hope that this program will be helpful to you in planning for your future, in addition to looking at and critically evaluating your business and finding ways to help improve profitability or help improve your management practices. First step will be Peggy Murray discussing income over feed costs and how it relates to your business.
Good morning. As Kelsey said, my name is Peggy Murray and I'm the Farm Business Educator in Jefferson and Lewis County. And today, one of the things we are going to touch on is the income over feed costs. As everyone knows on a dairy farm, that your feed cost is your highest cost on the farm. And so when we look at income over feed costs, it's a good way to measure the profitability of your farm. So anything that you have left after you pay the feed bill is what you have left to pay everything else. So some of the variables we'll look at are the feed costs, your milk production, the price that you're getting paid for your milk income every day, and then you're going to subtract your feed costs on a daily basis. And this will get you your income over feed costs. So here's just an example. We have herd A, herd B. Their milk production, herd A is 85 pounds, herd B is 70 pounds. The feed cost for herd A is $4.15, and this is per cow per day. And herd B's cost is $3.25. So their feed cost as a per hundredweight of milk is $4.88 for herd A. For herd B, it's $4.33. So when you subtract those two, you're going to get your income over feed costs. And that'll be $7.33 for herd A. Herd B is $6.88. Your gross milk price is $13.50 for both farms. So your gain in profit from maximizing your income over feed costs is 45 cents for herd A, and there's no increase for herd B. So although herd B has a lower feed cost, the owners are realizing 45 cents less income over feed costs per day than herd A. On a 100-cow dairy farm, that would be a gain of over $16,000 over 1 year's time. So how do you get this figure? Income over feed costs is an efficiency measure that allows you to gauge the return from a change in your feeding program. It's the only measure that ties nutrition to herd profitability, and it can help you keep you from making a change that may appear to cut feed costs, but actually results in a milk loss that's greater than the savings. It allows you to measure changes in your ration, and it allows you to do it on a daily basis. So how much risk you are taking by making a feeding change, and how much income you stand to gain or lose from making that feed change. On this site, there's a link to find a spreadsheet so that you could actually calculate your own income over feed costs, and allow you to do this on a regular basis. So just at the end of this presentation, look for the link and bring that up, and you should be able to do that. And again, Kelsey and I are available for questions, emails, telephone calls if you have any questions on this topic or any of the other ones that we're presenting today. Okay, so next we're going to talk about labor and the OSHA updates. You know, labor is a hot topic in the world of dairy and agriculture. And so we really need to keep up on what the changes in the forms that are used, the changes in New York State Department of Labor, the federal Department of Labor, and then also OSHA. So if you're a farm that has 10 or more non-family employees, then you are required, you are OSHA compliant. You need to be OSHA compliant. And so we're not going to go into all of the things that that you need to do for OSHA. There's some great sites. Again, we'll send the links to those, and so that you can be up to date on those, but we're just going to go over some of the, things that have changed since the first of the year. So one of the changes is the minimum wage. As everyone knows, New York State's minimum wage went to $9.70 an hour as of 12/31/16. So everybody needs to pay their employees at least this amount. You also need to update the poster and have this visible for all employees to see. And this will increase for the next few years until it comes up to $12 an hour. At that time, New York State will review it and see if they need to increase it. So just make sure that you're paying $9.70 an hour per employee. The other new form that businesses need to use is the new I-form. Again, on 1/23/17 this year, the new I-form was put out. So any new employees hired after that date needs to have this form filled out. And I've got a picture of that. There's just a few changes on what they're asking for, but make sure that you use this form. And again, there's no I-9 form verification yet, electronically verification. So we're hoping that that doesn't take place until they have an immigration reform coming up. But please make sure you use this form. And again, there's going to be a link to this form so that you can find it right on this site. If not, just you can just Google I-9s 2017 and you should be able to get the form. And as you see right on the page right here, everything's blue highlighted. So if you get a form like that, that means that you can type in everything right on the form. So you don't even have to print it until after everything's filled out. Make sure you sign it, make sure your employee signs it, make sure you see their documentation so that you know that it's the right documentation for them. So that's, the new I-9 form. And if you're not having employees fill this out, you need to. This is just one of the forms that is required. We've heard some inklings that there's been some I-9 inspections across New York State. So make sure that you have all your I-9s up to date and that they're filled out correctly. If they're not filled out correctly, you cannot go back and have them fill out a new one. You have to add a paper or write something next to it to do it. But you can't throw that one away and start out with a new I-9. You have to keep the original one. They should all be kept together. All your I-9 should be kept in a separate folder. So if there is an I-9 inspection, and you get written notification, they will give you a couple days to put everything together and you have them. Another suggestion is that you keep current employees in one folder and then employees that are no longer working for you in another folder, but keep them current. And you need to keep all I-9s for 3 years after an employee leaves your business. So you need to keep that paperwork for 3 years. So there's just we're just touching again today on some of the updates. Posting requirements. You need to have all the posters for labor in a place where your employees can see them. So if you have a time clock and employees punch in every day, if you have a break room, if it's in the milk house, someplace where the employees have access to it on a daily basis. So you need to have all of these posters and like I said, very visible to the workers. You need to keep your New York Farm minimum wage poster for all of them. You need to keep a sample of the pay notice and work agreement for farm workers. And again, every employee should fill this out. Every new employee should have this filled out. You keep a copy and you give a copy to those workers. If you're required to pay unemployment insurance, then you need to have that poster. You cannot find this poster online, but there's a number to call to get your poster. So you can't just go on New York State and find that unemployment insurance poster, but go online, and again, we'll give you that number so that you can call them and they will send you an unemployment poster. You're required to carry workers' compensation, and that poster should also be visible. So it's a poster, saying who's your workers' compensation carrier, and that needs to be posted also. There's just a right to know poster. What are employees' rights? And that's again another poster that needs to be there. And then there it is again. I said the unemployment insurance, and there it is, and that is the number to call to get your poster, because that is not anything you can find online. Your workers' compensation poster is provided by your insurance carrier. Usually get it the first of the year. Somehow some of these posters seem to come up missing. I recommend that maybe you make a copy, especially of the workers' compensation poster. Keep it in a separate file. For some reason, if it gets wet or damaged or lost, then you have a copy for that, and it just saves headaches of trying to call and get another one. And minimum wage poster you can find right online, and all the other ones also. So, but recommend making a copy of your workman's comp so that you have it. I've had many phone calls on that. I lost it, so just a headache that hopefully we can avoid. So federal posting requirements. Employee polygraph protection, if that applies, that you're an equal opportunity employer, that needs to be there. The OSHA, you have a right to a safe and helpful workplace. And again, if you're an employer who has 10 or more non-family employees, and by non-family, I mean, family is father, children, grandchildren, along that line, but it doesn't mean cousins and uncles. So it's immediate family, and that's 10. So if you have 10 or more non-family employees, you need to have your OSHA poster up there. And then your Uniform Service Employment and Reemployment Rights Act. So these are just posters that are protecting the employees, and so they know what their rights are. And these should all be posted. I recommend a nice big board that you can stick them on, with the thumbtack. I really like to use the clear plastic page sleeves. They tend to keep them a little bit dry, keep the fly specks off them. They work really well too. Employee breaks. This is a really been a lot of a topic of conversation. So employees, if they are hourly employees, are required to punch out during the lunch hour for a half an hour. So between 11 and 2 p.m., employees are required to punch out, and you are not allowed to pay them for this time. So I know that, you usually do, farms are really good and just pay them. If it's a 12-hour shift, a 10-hour shift, you pay them through it. But this is a New York State law that they have to punch out, and that that they have to take this break, and you cannot pay them for that. So if it's during the day, and this is for any employee who works more than 6 hours, they need to take that break between 11 and 2. If they're working the evening shift, then those hours are 4 to 7, and they need to punch out for a half an hour, and you need to have records of that. So this is hard for the employees, especially if they've never done it. So now they feel like they're not getting paid for that time, and but it's the law. So you need to explain that to them and keep records for it. So if it's a time clock, then they need to go punch out and then punch back in. If you just do like a timesheet, they need to hand write it in, but you need to have records of them punching out between those times. So these are just a few of the employee and labor updates, and we'll keep you posted. We try to make sure look in our newsletter when there's any new anything new coming up that we think that farmers need to know. We're really good looking our newsletter. We send out emails and stuff to make sure that you you have the current information when it happens.
So this is Kelsey O'Shea. I am new to the Northern New York Regional Ag team, and my focus is farm business management. I serve the 6 counties of the North Country, and for this topic section, I'll be talking about milk price, the updates to it, and just general thoughts around milk price and our management decisions. So for the first thing I'm going to talk about is changing in our milk price landscape. The biggest change we've seen recently is that most premiums have gone away. It's my understanding that the last few co-ops have sent notice that there will be no more premiums as far as some of them are quality or volume or other types of premiums as of June of 2017. In addition, there's no longer the BST-free premiums. In addition, most co-ops have required that farms be BST-free. So the questions that this brings up for me is, for the first time, is there some validity to shipping less milk? So without volume premiums, and really with the focus of how our milk price, how we're paid on components and then a little bit on quality, is there a point to not focus so much on total pounds of milk shipped, but to really focus more on components and quality? So how do we evaluate this diminishing point of returns? Well, the previous theory has always been, push to be a high average herd, push for that 100 pounds. But there is this point of diminishing returns where eventually feeding that extra grain or whatever it is in your feed mix, it gets you to 100 pounds. The additional amount of dollars you're earning that used to be premiums or whatnot is no longer there. So that additional feed cost may not actually be paying for itself. It may actually be setting you backwards. Now, that being said, these are all things you need to evaluate on an individual farm basis. This isn't, one formula fits all. So you have to look at where that point of diminishing returns is for your farm. Maybe you have really feed efficient cows and you can get to 100 pounds without having to add a great feed increase or feed cost increase. But I know for some herds, there's definitely some point of diminishing returns as far as what you're pushing feed at and the milk you're getting out, somewhere between that 90 to 100 pound mark. So what premiums were you getting in the past as well versus the feed cost of reaching that? So in the past, it may have made sense to push for that additional volume, but it's important to evaluate without a 10 cent, a 20 cent, a 30 cent premium. Does that still make sense? Milk price projections. So I definitely don't have the magical crystal ball that will tell you exactly what's going to happen. What I can tell you is from the more recent trainings and information sessions that I have attended, we're sitting in a place right now where there's really wobbly conditions globally. And I say globally because realistically, we can't just look at milk price in terms of regional or even national. We need to be looking at it as the global marketplace, since that's really where we're operating these days. With that being said, the more recent speaker that I saw back in December was Tom Bailey from Rabobank, and his presentation on global dairy markets look forward to 2017. What this really indicated from his presentation is that we're experiencing wobbly conditions. So while things are going well in the sense that many of the other global players in milk production are decreasing their production, the US continues to increase, which could leave us in a good position to export more milk. But at the same time, we're experiencing some downward pressure of the economy not really recovering, in addition to now some instability with regard to trade deals and what options we'll have. So for every factor that is pushing to increase milk price and make things look better, there's a matching factor that's pushing back down on that milk price. So it's left us kind of in this lower end of the spectrum limbo, which we had really hoped, I know, when experiencing the first part of this downturn back in 2015, that this would be more of a quick blip like 2009. Unfortunately, that's not what we're seeing. These wobbly conditions continue to keep prices down lower than what we would like, I would say. And for, like I said, for every factor we get a little bit ahead, we take another step back based on another combative factor. So in addition to this, his discussion talked a little bit about purchasing power and how people are spending their money. And unfortunately, millennials are kind of causing some problems for milk sales. They're very, very concerned with where their food comes from. All of a sudden, they're very concerned with having tons of variety in dairy products. While they can come in many forms, there are lots of options. Unfortunately, millennials tend to get bored very quickly and want to move on to something else. So while we have very tried and true dairy products out there between milk, cheese, yogurt, that's not really what millennials are looking for. So fluid milk sales continue to decline. Cheese and butter are performing better than they were in 2015. There is the general belief that we should continue to see price improvement in 2017. But with that being said, improvement has kind of steadily tapered off. So obviously all of this market change is really subject to speculation, which really is just a fancy word for saying it's a little bit emotional. So while this emotional roller coaster continues to go on, I would really recommend focusing on the things that you can control. So when we look at the factors of our milk price that we can control, the biggest factors of those would be our quality, which most people are still getting a premium for, and the components that you're making, because that's how you're paid. Those are the two things that you can focus on. You know, to get caught up in what's going on regionally or even what's going on in the US as far as milk price is concerned, those are not things that you can control. Looking inward at your farm, I think, is a much more effective approach. So when we look at what's going on with milk prices, as you can see, we've got class 3 and class 4 over there with mailbox as well. So realistically, we're hovering in that kind of 17.45 range for an average, which is, again, not the improvement we were looking for this year, but at the same time, we're not seeing any huge dips back down to 14 or 15 like we have seen. So the USDA is predicting a $1 increase in all milk price for 2017. And some other folks are predicting more like a $2 per hundredweight increase. So there's some variation in what people think the markets are going to do. The hope, obviously, is that global demand will increase. And while these other global players are decreasing their production of milk, we will be a likely choice for more exports to provide that milk. So other factors that will affect the milk price, new president and trade deals. I definitely have no right to comment on any of that, other than we're all just kind of watching and waiting to see what happens. And there is some sense of instability surrounding that. So obviously what the world does. So while Europe and other major countries would continue to contract their milk supply, the US continues to grow or to steadily stay the same. We'll also have to look at this butter and cheese supply with what we've had for oversupplies, and then weather. Last year we saw a pretty considerable drought in parts of New York State. Now, while that doesn't make a blip on the global market, it definitely affects us regionally in what we're doing at home. In addition, with fires in the Midwest and major losses of cattle herds, there will be some fluctuation probably in the US come springtime. So with all that talk of things that we can't control, there's been a lot of discussion on some farms taking back the power and direct marketing portions of their own milk between plants, as opposed to being a member of a co-op. Now, I realize that especially in the northern region, there's limited options for processing and limited options to do direct marketing, but there is still some validity to looking at this as an option. When we talk about our current milk pricing system, it's a bilateral negotiation system. We've been this way for quite some time. So with that being said, there's been discussions and research at Cornell University through Andrew Novakvich on whether or not that milk pricing system really is the right ticket, or is there another pricing system out there that we could implement that farmers would be happier with? I recently participated in one of his studies that looked at the potential for pricing milk more like an auction system as opposed to this bilateral negotiation. Now, while farmers were still unhappy with the portion of the test that we did where milk price was priced how it normally is, they were also unhappy with using it or having it be an auction system as well. So we haven't found the perfect option yet. I don't know if we ever will, but that's not a reason to still look at and understand our bilateral negotiation system and whether or not there might be something better out there. And then, as we talked about, given what you're in control of, what can you do? Some other avenues besides controlling production, quality, or the pounds of components are insurance. You know, there's a lot of discussion of insurance out there, and as using it as a risk mitigation tool. The biggest advice, I guess, that I could try and provide is that I have found the people that tend to be most successful are not those that play the market selectively, but those that stick with it. So sort of from the same premise of we're going to experience highs and lows in the marketplace, but the 10-year average is going to be right about flush or right about in the middle. It's the same thing if you're hedging milk or trying to lock in prices. If you do it consistently for a reasonable percentage of your milk, you're usually going to wind up over the long run doing okay. If you try to cheat the market or play the market selectively, there's more opportunities for you to get burned. So as you can see the picture on the slide here, it is complicated to try and figure out how our milk prices are, I guess, come to fruition. I would love to say that it's something we can all learn and figure out, but at least understanding the factors that influence your mailbox price will help you better control your management decisions and hopefully improve your milk price.
Okay, this is Peggy again, and I'm just going to talk about the cost of raising dairy replacements. And can you afford to do this? And it's kind of funny. I've had some, one-on-one farm visits and had a group meeting the other day, and this was the topic of conversation is, how much does it cost to raise a dairy replacement? I think dairy farmers think, oh my goodness, if I have a heifer calf, I have to raise it. And so we're just going to talk about that a little bit and, what are your costs associated with that? And I think when you do this and really put everything into it, farmers are really surprised at how much it costs to raise a replacement. So, so we're just going to walk through this a little bit. So when you are raising a heifer, we know that the feed that you feed that heifer is one of the costs that, it's the largest cost, and then we have all of our livestock costs, and then you have the facility and the equipment. It's called, the dirty five. It's the depreciation, the interest, the repairs, taxes, insurance that you have to include in that. So just for this example, we're going to say we're feeding our heifers 6 tons of dry matter. So which at a cost of about $1,200 a head. So just to get, and this is for heifers that are being raised to come to start milking at 24 months. So they're going to calve in at 24 months. And so for practical purposes and for farms that can, do that at 22, 23 months, then obviously your costs are going to be a little bit lower because you can have a couple of months of not, let me get my thought here, of not having to feed these cows without them producing some income for you. So anyway, but for this example, it's 6 tons of dry matter, and so when we do that, it's $1,200 a head. So right off the bat, you're at $1,200 just to feed that heifer before they start making any milk. And then when we put the livestock costs, that's approximately $250 a head, and that includes supplies and trucking, vet and medicine, the bedding, the fuel, breeding, and any other thing that goes along with livestock costs. And we throw trucking in there because quite often that heifer is trucked back and forth between barns. It probably is 4 or 5 barns, before it actually comes into the milking herd. So and that's at a cost. So trucking surprisingly is a big cost when you're doing that. And I've already talked about the facilities and the equipment and what those costs are. We have to include labor costs, and for this study, it's about 35 cents a day per head. So when you look at that, it's $250 a head. So for labor that you've dedicated to raising that heifer. And then your ownership costs, your interest on the investment is approximately $87 a head. So the total cost of raising this heifer comes out to about $2,000 a head for 24 months. For some farms, it's more. So other farms, it's less. But can you buy a good heifer for less than $2,000 a head? And there's going to be all kinds of arguments on what you do. You know what you're getting. You know your genetics. So it's worth the extra money to know that I'm getting that. Or if you keep a good handle on what your costs are, you can, you know, for this study, it was $2,000 a head, but some farms can do it cheaper. Heifer growers who just, you know, raise heifers for other people, custom heifer raiders, they know what their costs are. They have it right down to, they have to, you know, that's their business. I think dairy farmers is just another side of the business, is what you do. And so is it feasible for me to raise my heifers? You know, right now, cost of heifers are down. So you may be able to buy them cheaper, but what are the genetics again? What are you getting? So, but looking at that, you know, or maybe just raising some of your best and choosing to sell some of the other ones, not raising as many heifers. That might be an option too. So I think, you know, but you have to write a check out for those heifers where when you're raising them, it's just absorbed in the cost of the overhead cost of your business.
This is Kelsey again. I'm going to be talking about relationships and lending in a dairy downturn, and how to keep good relations with your lender and what's really important. So I have to say this picture I have on the slide might be my favorite picture about farming ever. And I know for a lot of people, you know, you have a close relationship with your lender and with the bank. The big things when we experience financial hardship, dairy downturns, those sorts of things, a lot of times we get in a very fast-paced routine, especially when we have to fill out our balance sheets every year or trying to get our financial information ready for taxes. We tend to kind of skim over the act of filling out our balance sheet. This is it's a really common thing. I've done it. I understand why it happens, but especially in times like this, when we're starting to experience financial stress, this is something we really can't do. To just skim over these and assume that everything on there is correct or update just a couple items and call it good, this can cause a lot of stress should something go wrong in your business, should you experience some other type of hardship. This can cause a lot of problems, and it really doesn't take us that much longer. So my big recommendation, especially this year and going into next year, is to really review your balance sheets in detail. Double check that equipment. You know, is half of that stuff in the scrapyard now? Have you traded some of it in? You know, a lot of a common mistake I see a lot of times is, you know, you get a new piece of equipment and you might have traded something really old in for a couple $1,000 bucks, and we forget to take that old piece of equipment off of the balance sheet. Now, while that doesn't seem consequential for a few $1,000s, ultimately it really does make a difference. And if it's accidentally inflating your net worth or making it look like you're in a financial position that you're not, this can be a huge problem. So double checking that equipment list is a big one, especially to, you know, when you do that and you go through that list, it's a great time to reprint it and send it to your insurance company to just remind them, hey, here's my most updated equipment list. Because, you know, while we have mostly policies that are blanket policies for a certain dollar amount, you know, you may find out you're not insured enough. You've bought 3 to 4 pieces of equipment, or you bought a bunch of stuff in 2014 and we never sent them a new updated list. There's all those sorts of things. And the really tough part about all of these factors is that we don't realize that there have been mistakes made or we've passed over things until we're in a tight spot, until an emergency's happened and we need to use our insurance, or until we're in a financially tough spot. And once you're at that point, there's a million other factors at play. There's emotions, there's time, you know, you're limited with your options. Whereas taking the time and looking through these things right now will just make any sort of event that comes up for your business so much easier. In addition, when we're double checking those balance sheets, be sure to check on credit cards or payables. A lot of times we get in the system of going and the system of filling things out, and we forget to add in, oh yeah, I have a feed bill that's probably about $5,000. And again, in the grand scheme of a business, while $5,000 or $2,000 may not seem like a whole lot, it all adds up, especially when you're looking at your net worth and your capacity to borrow going forward. So adding those payables in there, being upfront with your loan officer, it's only going to help the relationship. Almost all ag lenders in this area, they're familiar with what's going on. They're as understanding as they possibly can be, and they do genuinely want to help. So another item to double check on those balance sheets are your accounts receivable. At times we forget to update what our current milk check is actually. We might have filled it out when 2014 was a really, really good milk year, and we still have that accounts receivable for our monthly milk checks, sitting out there on our balance sheet from 2014, and that can't be right anymore. So again, take the time, look these things over, really put some effort into it. It's also a good time to update your insurance, and really utilize that balance sheet and evaluate your net worth situation. So planning early and making sure your budgets are solid. This is a big one. It's really hard to get through half of a year and realize that you need more money because you didn't plan your budgets or you weren't sure. The other thing for lenders is having to service your loans or your relationship more than once a year can be somewhat of an indicator of financial troubles. So really planning ahead and being honest with yourself about the money that you're going to need to operate this year. This financial downturn is not novel to anybody. Everybody is experiencing some version of financial stress. So being really honest with yourself, with your budgets, with your lender, really only helps that relationship along and will actually decrease your stress later on, as opposed to having to come back because you need more operating funds or you forgot about a purchase that you really need to make. I'll caveat that with saying emergencies happen, equipment blows up, things happen. It is not the do all end all to have to go back and request more money mid-year. I mean, farming by nature is just unpredictable. But really doing your best to try and at least plan for the things you can control and make sure that you've included in your budget all the items that you're really going to need. That's really important. And when we look at payables or bills or things like that sitting out there, the reality is that in a lot of cases, your lender's interest rate is going to be considerably less than the feed companies, than credit cards, than a lot of these other companies that we can accrue payables with. So in a lot of cases, it's really in our farm's best interest to understand and evaluate how much operating funds we're going to need to continue to operate that won't be coming from income because of the low milk price, and really try and request and build that into our budgets and payments. Now, that being said, operating funds ideally are paid back within 12 months, full well realizing that in a dairy downturn that may have to be extended to 24 months for it to make sense. But the flip side to not having this option with your lender at 4.5% interest is accruing these payables through the feed company, through semen companies, through whoever at 10 or 15% interest. So realistically, the difference, there's a monstrous difference between 4 to 5% and 10 to 15%. It will be taking you double or even triple the time to pay those bills off at that higher interest rate percentage. As well, because part of the reason they charge that large amount of interest is because they have no collateral. So, really, when you're looking at the actual dollars and cents of your business, trying to save your money on interest, it really is a good idea to just plan ahead with the operating funds that you're going to need, discuss that with your lender, and find out if that's an option for you. Being upfront with your lender and really making the effort to keep that door open, an open line of communication. To do that now is much better than to do it later when you're having problems or when there's something, an emergency's happened on the farm. And finally, the big thing is to remember the 5-year plan. while it's really easy to kind of get sucked into the hardship of a low milk price year, and it feels like we just stop everything that's non-essential. We're only focusing on trying to get through, only trying to get through this year or next month or the next 6 months. A lot of times we put off purchases, we put off repairs, we back heifers off of feed. We do whatever it takes to try and stay financially solvent, which I completely understand. But at the same time, I'm cautionary of that mentality, because ultimately the fluctuation in prices will go back up. Times will change, and you wouldn't want to put yourself in a position where you have crippled or hindered your business so much that you can't capture those highs. That's a huge portion of this. While we try and put off every major capital purchase because it's a low milk price year and we shouldn't be buying anything and we should all just be bunkering down, if we spread some of those out and still kept a couple of those capital purchases that we needed in our lower milk price years, while it may make things tight and it may be hard to have those purchases later on and to have them over and done with by the time milk price comes back up, we've found a way to operate at a lower milk price point and still get things done we needed to get done. So then when milk price goes up, we feel that much more successful. We're not having to take on, a huge amount of capital purchases, which is a lot of what we saw in 2014. People put things off from 2009 all the way until 2014 and then kind of went on a crazy shopping spree. Unfortunately, those huge chunks, instead of spreading them out over time, feel like a much more difficult piece to bite off. Transitioning our business slowly yet efficiently and effectively feels a lot easier than taking huge leaps and bounds or buying a whole bunch of equipment at once. So keeping in mind what your 5-year plan is, whether that be expansion, bringing another family member into the business, changing your management styles, keeping those 5-year plans in mind, maybe altering them and some of the steps that you're going to do, but not foregoing them completely and just going kind of into survival mode. The more that we can do that, the better mentality we'll have going into a high milk price year. In addition, we'll have kept our management practices in line with what we need to really capture those highs for milk price. So starting the conversations early and trying to remember that a lot of lenders out there are really just there to help. So trying to make sure that you're keeping them, up to date with what's going on with your business, even if that just means a phone call, 6 months in between servicings and saying, hey, we made a few changes. Everything's actually going really good. We're doing all right. That's really helpful for them. So there's no surprises, which is a huge motto of the ag lenders up here, is no surprise lending. That, it should never be a shock to you as a business owner that your business is in financial stress. We should be talking about these things early and trying to find ways to help mitigate issues and mitigate risks overall. Are we ready?
Okay, this is Peggy again, and I'm going to lead into what Kelsey just talked about, and then she's going to add some things too. So, there's tough decisions, and even though the times are hard, what do you want the future to be? So do you want to continue farming? And so if you do, then, some of the decisions that you make now will impact if you're going to be in business in the future. So we're going to just talk about some of those. So hopefully, we're going to have a price increase. We wouldn't be farming if we weren't optimists. So we're always looking like, it's the end of winter or the first week of spring, I guess, and we're eternal optimists. And we know that the grass is going to green up and the fields are going to dry out and we're going to plant the corn and the corn's going to come up. So we are eternal optimists. And so you're ready for those, to see that green grass and to see that, to see those crops start sprouting out of the field. So are you also ready for the price increase? So what you did in 15 and 16 is going to affect you in 2017, 2018. And I think we can learn a little bit of lessons from 2009. So we had a really great year in 2008, as all you probably can remember. And then I went to a program and farm credit, somebody was there and said, are you ready for $16 milk? And we had been experienced $21, $22 milk. And we're like, oh, I'm like $16 milk, we're a little bit nervous. And we went through the holidays, and then we came into January and the price was $12. So wouldn't we have liked to have that $16 milk? And we were not prepared for that $12 milk. And so it really caught everybody, economists, farmers, everybody. And it was a tough year. But what 2009 was, it was really brutal, but then it was over. I mean, we had, a year of really low milk price, and then we started seeing it going back up. 15 and 16 has just, and now we're into 17. And so we're seeing these prices hang on. If it's not quite as drastic as it was in 2009, but it's been hanging on for a lot longer. And so some of those decisions that folks made in 2009 to stay in business also affected what happened when the milk price eventually did go up and stuff. And so those are the things that we want to talk about, decisions that you make because you have to stay in business will have a long-term impact. So we won't be able to capture the highs. And I think that that's what we have to do in the dairy industry, is that we have to be able to capture those highs. Had a conversation with a farmer yesterday, and he was thinking maybe he's going to do some forward contracting. Never done that. He said, I've always heard and always thought that you just want to be able to capture those highs. You just kind of manage the lows, but when the highs hit, you want to be ready to capture them. He goes, I'm rethinking that a little bit. So he wanted some information on maybe, doing some forward contracting. So, farmers are thinking about it because this has gone on for, we're over 2 years. So some of the things that you do, playing catch up, well, how will it affect you moving forward? Kelsey just talked about all the accounts payable, and, I help farms with balance sheets, and those accounts payable, those are probably the first thing that you probably should clean up if you have it, because of the interest rate. For one, they're not the banks, and so their interest rates are not as good as a bank. You're paying probably, in the double digits for interest for on those accounts payable. So I say that that's probably one of the first things that you should do, and there's things that you can do, playing catch up, get rid of those, be creative in how you do business. We've had some interest in, forming a buyer's group to get better prices. Some of the small farms, maybe aren't able to, because of their size, get a volume discount, but maybe 2 or 3 farms going together, agreeing to buy the same thing might be a way to go and get that better price. I have a lot of farms that barter. You barter with the neighbor. Hey, you mow my hay, I'll come bale yours, and so they don't need to have those both pieces of equipment. We're getting it done, and it really works, So barter with your neighbor. If they have a service that they can do and you have something that you can do for them, there's no check having to be written out, and you're both getting something for that. Pay cash when possible. Those cash discounts are big, and if you can pay the cash for them, you're going to get a discount. And, and sometimes you don't even realize how much it is. And so I've had farms kind of keep track. I said, I don't care if you keep it tracked in a 3-ring binder, but every discount, and add those up at the end of the year, and how much you save by being able to pay cash and get that discount. And ask them, is there a discount if I pay cash? And if there is, maybe that's a priority. And if there's not, then, pay the other one that is offering it. Pay that one first. Don't make it late that you're going to be paying finance charges on that. But see if there's a cash discount. And then, as I said, get those payables paid up as soon as possible. They're really high, and you're not able to move forward when you have bills from the previous year that you're still trying to pay for. So make that a priority. So I think, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about this portion too. So, and to add on to what Peggy was just talking about, a big one that I saw was in 2012 when grain prices went really high. For any of you that were selling corn, life was good. there was a lot of farms then that racked up feed bills. It's something we cannot forego. We don't ever want to not feed our cows, obviously. But in the latter part of 2012 and into 2013, I spent a lot of time as a lender helping farms refinance feed bills. And what that did, big feed bills, things that just got, out of control. And unfortunately, because we kept thinking, well, next month it'll go down, I'll hang on to it for another month. That pushed them into, 6 months of feed bills out there built up plus interest. Now, all of a sudden, because, that feed it's not an asset. It's not something that I can put onto a balance sheet. And when I was lending, I was having to take a lot of these feed bills and stretch them out, over 3 to 4 years to try and get them paid back, just so that the payments would be all right. And, to make sure that I wasn't taking the farm into too much debt. When you're trying to pay, 6 months of feed bills back over 3 to 4 years, it just cripples your business going forward. It makes it really hard to expand, to make changes, to buy that next piece of equipment that you need. The phrase that we use a lot is dead horse debt. It's kind of the same thing as buying land. When we buy land, inevitably, we put it out over really long terms for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes so the payments are lower in the event of, low milk price years like this. And sometimes because, land's going to do nothing but appreciate. I might as well stick it out over further because it's not going anywhere and I'm probably never going to sell it. But that idea of dead horse debt, that's really, for what you took the dollars out for, the useful life of what you took it out for now has, far gone by, and you're continuing to pay that debt long beyond the useful life of the asset that you've purchased. It really causes a lot of problems with trying to get to your next step. Knowing your costs is a big one. I work with a discussion group, and a lot of what we're focusing on is really nailing down feed cost. This is something that, every farm size from 100 cows to 3,000 cows deals with, and really getting a strong hold on what that feed cost is, knowing the tonnage that you're feeding, knowing what it costs you to put that feed up. We're pretty fortunate in most of the northern region that we didn't experience as significant of a drought as other places. So if it's costing you an exorbitant amount of money to put your own forage up, is there an option for you to buy from a neighbor cheaper, or to, work with someone else like Peggy had indicated? But the only way you're ever going to know that is if you pay attention to what it actually costs you to make that feed, and then pay attention to how much of it that you're feeding. It's really important in order for the professionals that you use to help you, so your nutritionist, your banker, any of these things, you have to come to the table with the information. Their role is to analyze and help find creative solutions, but they can't pull that information together for you. That's got to be you. So really knowing your costs is a big one, and evaluating whether or not those costs are indeed profitable for you. So we talked a little bit about that at the beginning, about, with milk price. Does it really make sense to push to be 100 or 120 pound herd when we're not getting a volume premium? Does that make sense? Or am I foregoing, feeding for more total pounds of milk as opposed to feeding for components, which is, what most of us are getting paid on. And obviously we strive to keep our cows as clean as possible and have, the best somatic cell counts that we can. But it's important to evaluate to, again, where that point of diminishing returns is, to make sure that we're matching up with what we're getting paid for with what makes sense management wise. So when we talk about knowing our costs, really focusing on that balance sheet, getting our income statement nailed down, and then cash flow statement is one that we don't pay as much attention to. A lot of time we're really focused on the income statement and the balance sheet, but your cash flow is super important. The reason this document is so important is because this is really what you need to talk with your lender about. What are you making for cash each month? What are you going to need to cover a cash deficit? Because the reality is, given that farming is seasonal, I would be shocked if there wasn't most farms at least 1 month of the year when they're buying crop inputs where they're at a cash deficit, unless it's, $25 milk. almost everybody has fluctuations in that just because of the timing. And it's like Peggy talked about, if we can capture some of those discounts by, prepaying or paying cash up front or buying in March or early April for our crop inputs for spring, those savings are worth it, but you need to have planned full well knowing, okay, I want to pay all this stuff early, but I won't have enough cash to do it. So I need to make sure I have enough room on my line of credit to get that done. You're still going to be saving, the cash savings far outweigh the small amount of interest that you'll pay, all just because of the timing of when cash is coming into your business. These are the things that you're going to get from a monthly cash flow statement. A lot of the farms I work with, I highly recommend that we work through this document because while an income statement shows the whole year, we can look at that and say, oh, okay, we're making money, or, oh, okay, we're about break even. But when we break this monthly cash flow statement out, holy moly, there's 3 months out of the year where we have a $10,000 cash deficit or a $20,000 cash deficit. The rest of the months we're making money or breaking even, but those 3 months, what are we going to do? All three are important. They affect one another. Looking at the picture as a whole is really important. And the last piece of advice that I could try and throw out there is to really take the time to budget. Take the time, sit down, think about your year, think about what you want, and really it doesn't have to be unbelievably detailed or complex, but it needs to outline what you think your year is going to look like. And then at the end of that year, sitting down with that budget and saying, okay, did we perform? Did we, exceed our expectations? Did the milk price exceed our expectations? What happened? Because the only way for us to change year over year is to go back and evaluate our expectations versus our performance. And again, it's really easy to kind of get caught in the notion of, I just need to get through this. I just need to get through this. And to kind of stop some of these peripheral planning practices. I just want to encourage you to do that and remind everyone listening that Peggy and I are available to help with these services. A lot of times I find that it's not that farmers necessarily need my help with this, but they need a reason to sit down. And if I can be your reason to sit down and just do it, that works for me. That's totally fine. If you need help getting it done, we will help with that too. But if you just need a reason to get everybody in the room and get the discussion going, because it's really hard to justify it without an outside person being there because there's always 7 million other things to do, we can definitely provide that service. In addition, I'll remind everybody that there's a section of links at the end of this presentation that will connect you to some of the resources that we talked about, including how to calculate your feed cost, a cash flow statement, and then other labor-related items. So definitely utilize the links, work through some of this yourself, or feel free to contact Peggy or I via phone or email, and we will make ourselves available to come and meet with you for whatever it is that you think you need. Thank you for listening to our program, and should you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to contact us. So the final topic that we'll be talking about in our Managing Risk in a Dairy Downturn program is crop insurance options. Just to give a little bit of background on this program, this is a grant-funded program to help educate New York State farmers on the options for crop insurance and how it works. I'll be talking about primarily the options that relate to dairy farmers and the ones that you would be most likely to use. So obviously, crop insurance is one method of helping you reduce your risk. It's one method to help mitigate the risk of the weather and other incidents like that. So the basic principle of it is that you're paying in an annual premium, which is partially subsidized by the government, to buy an insurance policy. And then if your yields or revenues fall below a certain level due to covered losses, so too much or too little rain, hailstorm, or other type of weather incident, you receive an indemnity payment based on those yields or revenues. So the crop insurance products for dairy farmers, the first one would be a single crop policy for corn, for grain or silage, as well as most other types of grains and oil seeds. Depending on if you're a grazing dairy or not, there is also pasture rangeland and forage coverage. And finally, there's livestock gross margin insurance, or the LGM program. So the single crop insurance is basically similar to what a crop farmer would buy. So corn grown as feed can be insured as either grain or silage. Several other grains and oilseeds are covered. Generally, the losses are related to weather, natural disasters, or severe changes in price margins or in prices are covered. Losses for which the farmer is at fault and basically are not covered are an example would be if you used too much pesticide or herbicide that killed the plants, or other losses that are verified by your insurer and are deemed not insurable. You can select your coverage level somewhere between 65 and 90% of your yields or revenue. And then obviously the higher percentage coverage you want, the higher the cost of your premium would be, but inevitably the indemnities would be higher. Okay, the pasture, rangeland, and forage product. This ensures forage production against drought only. So I just do want to make that clear. There is no catastrophic coverage for the pasture, rangeland, and forage coverage that is offered. So payments are triggered when the rainfall drops below historic levels in your grid. So these are based on FSA grid maps that you can look up. Now, that being said, there's no historical production records required, which is an option for single item crop insurance or single crop insurance. And the producers choose the acreage and months covered. Now, that being said, there's different 2-month blocks across the year that you would select. In this particular area for grazing dairies, I've had dairies purchase primarily the summer months when they would be grazing the most, or also depending on if you can look up the rainfall near your grid area, it might be more prudent for you to purchase during the winter months because you may be able to get a larger payout. So livestock gross margin is the third product that's most pertinent to dairy farmers. It provides protection when feed costs rise or milk prices drop. It's basically the value of milk minus the feed cost. So enrollment occurs monthly, and you can covers 11 months. Indemnities are paid when the total actual gross margins over the cover period or 11-month period are less than the gross margin guarantee. So if you're going to participate in MPP, you are ineligible to participate in this program. So this is one of the few products that you can still enroll in at any time, as opposed to most of the coverage dates for corn. And I believe pasture land, we're past the dates where you can enroll for those too. So we have an excellent online tool where you can estimate your premium as well as your indemnities and see what part of your premium is subsidized by the government. And this is at aganalytics.org/crop insurance. I highly recommend visiting the site. It's very informative. The tools are very easy to use, very straightforward, and they will allow you to take into account your county, your previous yield, your farm specific situation, along with the percentage coverage options that you want. So I would highly recommend checking that out. So you go onto the website, you fill in the crop that you're looking to insure, the state, your county, the type, and then the practice for most of New York State is non-irrigated, the number of acres, and then if you're going to do it based on yields or revenues, you still want to put your yields in, so the approved yield or your average yield. When you select all this information and basically hit calculate, then you're given both a graph view and a table view of the percentage coverage levels, the different options. So there's enterprise, basic, and optional. Those are the different coverage packages. That's a separate matter than the percentage coverage or the price associated with it. Then this is the table view. I prefer the table view myself. I feel like it's much easier to read, much more straightforward. So here were the deadlines. So 3/15 was for corn, forage seeding, soybeans, whole farm revenue. July is for forage seedings in the fall. September is for forage production, and then 11/15 is for pasture and hay. So obviously we're past the date for most of these, with the exception of the LGM, which you can enroll in monthly. The best way to get a complete quote and complete options would be to talk to an insurance agent, but I would highly recommend checking out that website before you call your insurance agent, so you can have some kind of idea and make sure your conversations with them are productive. If you use the link on this page, that will give you a list of crop insurance in your area. This presentation was provided by Jennifer Ift from Cornell. She can be contacted at the email below for any further questions, or if you would like to contact me with any further questions, I can do my best to help answer those or put you in touch with those who can.